that I walked in the doors and realized how bad a shape the Institute was in, which if you're a fiscal conservative like I am, and you realize that fiscal conservative think tank hadn't been very fiscally conservative, it can be troubling. So we spent a lot of time trying to get it stronger, and today is a much stronger institute than it was 2 years ago, so that's a good thing. But it has there is a relationship to that and to the government that we are living under, whether it's a state, federal government, or local entities. And so what I want to walk through is some of the bigger issues that I think frame the whole Senate Bill 5 issue to. Senate Bill 5, of course, was the legislation passed this past year, signed by the governor. Issue 2 is the referendum that is now on the ballot, to which you will vote yes or no depending on your flavor of that. I want to kind of set the stage because I think that that's important as you consider how you're going to treat this issue. So I brought a little handout, so if you have that, I'll walk through that rapidly and then really open up for questions and answers because I think that's probably the more interesting part of this whole evening. So that first slide is what you see there, state government spends too much. What you'll see there is from 1990, projected through the next 2 years, which includes the budget that was just passed, Ohio's state revenue expenditures are up 144% since 1990. If you're adjusting, what that means is it's up 44%, and you can do the math, and I'm not actually very smart. Bill oversells that, but I can figure out 44 divided by 22, and that's 2. So that means every year state expenditures have gone up more than 2% on average than inflation. So we just continue to spend money at a pace that is unsustainable given the economy, and we'll talk about that in a minute. One of the things driving that at the state level is the gold-plated compensation packages that we have as state workers. And what we always do, and I don't think, if you've ever spent time on the Buckeye Institute website, you've heard me speak, I never personalize this in terms of pointing out, John Doe or Jane Doe, because I think any of us in their shoes would do exactly what they do, which is do what's best for our family and our family's finances. So this is not a personal issue. It merely is a fiscal reality that we have exceeded our ability to sustain some of the packages that are now around. What we did is we took the actual data from the last 8 to 10 years, and we took those trend lines of the increases per year and what that was amounting to, and we projected that 30 years forward. So that second graph that shows the gold-plated government compensation packages, what you can see is in 30 years, the median state worker will cost twice as much as median private sector peer. So that just gets to a point where you have to at some point say, wow, that isn't sustainable, and it's not. So that's at the state level. If you turn to the next page, that has that state of Ohio on it, and it's mostly it's a map of red. And obviously, red is never a good thing when talking finances. Every so often, the school districts have to submit their financial projections to the Ohio Department of Education. So last October, we went there and we polled all the numbers for every single school district. And what we did is we charted those. So you can go to our website and you'll see a chart for every single school district in the state of Ohio. One page has 3 pictures on it that show different pictures, and then the financial numbers behind that. Because we wanted to make sure that this was easily accessible to my mom, who doesn't have much time or interest in these things, but if she wanted to, she could quickly figure out what the issue is. And what we found is when you tally up the 614 school districts as of October of 2010, this is before Governor Kasich, before the local government fund cuts that just occurred in the last budget. This is before that. At that time, they were projecting a collective deficit by the year 2015 of $7.6 billion. You've heard about the $8 billion state budget deficit. Okay, so our school district is going to have a similar $8 billion deficit by the year 2015. When you add up the compensation packages, by 2015, they're projecting that 96% of all revenue will go to compensation packages. And what that means is, and that's a service industry, so you expect to have high compensation cost percentages. But what that means is you've got 4% of the budget that you can cut, whether it's art, music programs, sports, whether it's cheap toilet paper from China, doesn't matter how you nibble that 4%. you only have 4% that you can play with if you don't tackle the compensation package number. If you refuse to tackle the compensation package problem, you have to raise taxes or cut services, i.e. lay off young teachers and things like that. So this issue really comes to the forefront that by 2015, our school districts are hemorrhaging money unless taxpayers agree to raise taxes on themselves. Now, we all live in Franklin County, at least most of us do. Some are going to be Union, some are going to be Delaware, I understand. But we just got our property assessments recently, and I know we lost 5.1%. Some of my neighbors lost upwards of 14%, who live right next door, and the other numbers are similarly as bad. So at a time that you're losing more ground on your property, local governments are going to come to you and say, we need more money. So there's going to be a disconnect there, and I think we saw part of that disconnect in August when 85% of school levies fail when they sneak them in August because they expect them to pass because no one's paying attention. But they're all down in Hilton Head listening to Craig Russell sing on the oak tree. So that's kind of the way they, but 85 fail, which should tell you that taxpayers are starting to say, I'm not sure that's going to work this time. We're paying more attention, and I think that's part of the groups like this and the Tea Party groups. Now, the reason why this is happening is if you go to that next page, it says Ohio's private sector is way down. These are the most recent numbers, came out last week from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Notice every single page of this we cite to where we get this information. I know a lot of my friends on the left love to say we make stuff up. I make stuff up with my wife, but I don't do it with my kids. I do it with my kids. But when we try to live and breathe by the data because we know that's really what drives home. What that shows you is over the last 11 years, Ohio's private sector has lost about 10% of its jobs. At the same time, government's lost about 1%. So that in itself is an interesting number, but let's peel that back a bit and put that in the right context, because I think it's really important. In the year 2000, 11 years forward, we've lost 500,000 private sector jobs. That means we've lost 500,000 jobs that generated revenue that essentially went into necessary government services, right? That allowed us to fund government. But we now have 500,000 fewer of those jobs that are driving revenue into government to provide services and goods to vulnerable populations, schools, you name it. So that's problem number one. At the same time, if you see the size of number of employees in government in Ohio, it's 9,000 fewer. That's a little rounding error, essentially. But over the last 11 years, the compensation package increases, when you add them all together, have gone higher than inflation year after year after year, right? So what that means is we've got the same size government that costs a whole lot more, but we have 500,000 fewer people who are bearing the burden of that cost. So you can be a kind of big, liberal, progressive, I love government, I'm not really huge, but you can't have a vibrant government if you first don't have a vibrant private sector. And Ohio has not had a vibrant private sector in a really long time. And I know you kind of go, well, but Matt, we did in the 1990s, right? It was the boom era. If you go to that last chart that says, I need way down, that's also, again, let's put this into context. Ohio added jobs in the 1990s. About 700,000 jobs in the private sector net. Problem is, that was the 37th best performance in terms of job creation in the country. So as other states were really adding jobs, we added jobs, but at a really low pace compared to our neighboring states, especially the ones south and west in the U.S. The other problem is, the next 10 years, 2000-2010, we bled jobs tremendously. The second worst job losses in the country behind Michigan. So even though Trestle's gone, we'll still beat Michigan, we still can beat Michigan in one little area. We're number 2, they're number 1. So when you take those two things together, we have an economy that is systemically not functioning right and not allowing us to create private sector jobs and prosperity that allow us to drive revenue in the government, allow us to provide government services without getting into deficits. And that's kind of where we are, right? And so what you're thinking through, and when you get to the fixed number bargaining reform, what you have to realize is, and again, these are just tools. The proverbial, you can take the elephant to water, but you can't make it drink, right? Even if issue 2 is affirmed, right, and the reforms down the ballot, they do no good if superintendents, school boards, city managers don't actually use them, right? It's only as good as the tools provided, but it really requires folks to demand that accountability and make sure that these things are happening. Because, you know, I'm one of the, I guess, contrarians in this, that, you know, when the Democrats during the debate on Senate Bill 5 and the labor union said, you know, you're just doing this to excuse management for making bad agreements. They were partially right about that. And I said that, right? They were right. We put a bunch of folks in power who didn't represent the taxpayers in any real respect. And when revenues were coming in, which they were until about 2 or 3 years ago, it was easy to say yes. It was easy to give 3% raises on top of step increases, on top of longevity increases, on top of banking sick leave, on top of pension pickups, on top of all these other perks that got built into the system over 28 years. It was easy to say yes. Now we don't have the money. Saying no is a lot harder to do. Because now in the current system, you have to essentially try to figure out how do you peel back these things. And since it's all negotiable, you have to peel it back and give something else up. Or you go to some arbitrator who says, oh, I'm going to split the baby. And well, even if you can't afford the baby, too bad, you're going to have to find a way to pay for it, which is what happened in Toledo, essentially. So these issues are consequential because what we have is a mathematics problem. And I'm not trying to trivialize this issue, but we truly have a mathematics problem in the state of Ohio. We have a weak private sector. We have a housing market that's cratering. We have a stock market that today lost another 300 points, right? And there's a very good chance, given what's going on in Europe and other countries, that we're going to see either a double-dip recession or a global slowdown and stagnation, which means we can't expect a mass rush of new jobs and all this stuff's going to come pouring in and suddenly we're going to have a housing market that rebounds. And I read something today that indicated they don't believe that housing declines are going to stop until 2015. Now think about that. I gave you those numbers on 2015 in the school districts. This is Dublin, just so you know, and I guarantee you most of you don't know this because this information is well kept secret. The yellow line is what we'll call the rainy day fund. Dublin City Schools has a rainy day fund. The red line is the deficit or surplus that the school district has ended the year in 2008, 9, 10, 11, and then projected 12, 13, 14, 15. You can see it's been red every year except for 1 year. That was 2008. So every year since then, we finished in a deficit or projected to finish in a deficit, and it gets bigger every year. And so every deficit then takes money out of the rainy day fund. And by 2015, see that line? In Dublin, that's $56 million deficit by 2015. Now, you also notice there's a little slide up here. That's the last levy that passed, right? Brought a little bit of money in, but not enough to stop the hemorrhaging, right? Here are the compensation costs as a percentage of revenue in Dublin City Schools. Again, here you go. We're already close to 90% back in 08. It goes up, levy passes, comes down a bit, but you can see where it's headed. 112% by 2015. Compensation packages will swallow 112% of projected revenue. Again, you don't have to be a math major to understand that that's going to require an enormous tax increase that is even greater than the one that's going to be on the levy this November. That's going to be about 248, 249 per 100. You're going to have to be a bigger one than that 3 years later, unless, again, some serious fiscal management happens. Now let me tell you about it, because people say, oh yeah, it's easy for you to say that. I told you about when I started at Buckeye. I walked in and had about $430,000 in liabilities and about $5,000 cash on me. Kid you not. Had accounts payables that were almost a year old. So what I did is I walked in, I cut my own pay by 34%. I cut the next person's pay by 25%. And I kept coming until we got to a point where I felt that we had a chance to get to a burn rate that was low enough that over the course of me doing some fundraising and all that kind of stuff, we could actually slow the hemorrhaging, take care of the liability issues, which we did, and get healthy, right? Get healthy. And by the way, 2 years later, very healthy. I'm still not making what I came in at 2 years ago, because I still don't think that's the right thing to go. So this idea, right, that we can't possibly look at these hardcore reforms, it happens every day, all over America, all over Ohio. So we've got to get to a point where we realize you can't just keep coming to people who have lost their jobs, who haven't had pay raises, who have home values declining in the private sector, I would say, but we need you to pay more. And I'm sorry, but freezing step increases is an important concession. I don't want to trivialize it, but that's not going to solve the problem. We've got to have structural base realignments that fit revenue, whether it's at the school district level, whether it's the township, county, whether it's the state. And this is an issue where I'm not popular among some of my friends in the Republican Party because they don't like when I say, how is it that we're not going to absolutely cut state government compensation packages at a time we're expecting police and teachers and all these local folks to take cuts? How is it that we're giving raises to Senate staffers at a time when we're expecting police to be fired to take pay cuts. Frankly irresponsible. Frankly irresponsible. And it blurs the message and it makes us look like hypocrites. And so that's the kind of stuff that's got to stop. So at any rate, I'll stop now, because I probably got you all fired up since you're all Republicans. I am as well, but I'm a conservative first, and I'm a think tank second or first, and then I'm a Republican. But I'm happy to take any questions you have on the issue.
Matt, I think it's also safe to say you can count. We've got folks in the audience from both sides of the aisle. One thing about the Dublin Republican Club, whether we've got one speaker or multiple speakers, we're not afraid to take the hard questions and hear from both sides of the aisle what's going on. If I may, since I'm the president of the club, I'm going to ask the first question and then I'm going to turn it over to everybody. Isn't it true, I mean, the data you presented, for instance, on the school budget, burn rate, things like that, you took that directly from the 5-year forecast?
Yep, right off of the ODE website. You can go look at it today.
So
the site's on the bottom of that document. By all means, go look. Look for yourself, you don't believe me. The numbers will be a little bit different because we took ours in October, and when they updated them in May, they kind of purged the October numbers. But ours are there. They're pretty, actually for Dublin, they're actually incredibly close. Not much change from October to May in Dublin.
When I wrote an article, I called it Mathematically Impossible to Fix, and I took the State Teacher Retirement Service's own documentation. I mean, that's the nice thing about these studies. Yeah, pension. You can use their own data. I mean, they are not able to meet future obligations. They admit to that. See, so what are we asking our 20-something-year-old teachers, 30-something-year-old teachers about their future pension? We're forcing them to put money in, but we're putting it into a system that we admit cannot meet the payouts coming down the road. So clearly, I'm of the opinion that our state employees should be on the front line demanding fiscal responsibility and financial literacy. So that's
that's right. I mean, the healthiest, the 5 pensions, the healthiest is the PERS, which is the state one, and it has 75 cents in assets for every dollar in liabilities. And it's not getting better, right? STRS, which is the teachers' retirement system, has, I think it's 58 cents for every dollar, and this doesn't include their health care. The health care, it's even worse. It's like 31 cents for every dollar in liabilities. So this is a growing problem. I think that's exactly right. Those young teachers are going to be left dealing with either an empty bag or a significantly reduced package compared to those who retired ahead of them. And it's very much like we're seeing, Social Security, the folks who got in it did fine that are on it now, but those of us coming up are getting a negative return in many cases. And this is one of those things where a lot of times one of and I'm on a lot of shows with my friend Brian Rothberg from Progress, Ohio, and John McGowan from Center for Media Solutions. So I debate these issues all the time. And one of the things that they always say is, why do we want to bring public sector workers down? Why do we focus on bringing private sector workers up? And that sounds like a reason. Well, yeah, okay, let's do that. Right? But the problem with that is there's not a money tree where we can walk outside and go, here it is, there, it's done. And so what we actually did is, we ran this for the pension. If every private sector Ohioan had a pension like the median OPERS pension, which is about $39,000, it would cost Ohioans $123 billion a year, which would swallow 26% of Ohio's GDP. So that everyone got the same that the median state worker pension is getting today. So that puts into context that this is really a very tough thing for us to say, yeah, let's just raise it up, sure, why not? I mean, it's a system that has gotten a bit out of control. We need to rein it in, realign it to revenue, so that we can make sure we meet the obligations, make sure folks have a decent retirement, and that was always the grand bargain, right? You go work for government, you get job security, lower pay, but a decent pension. Well, none of that's true anymore. Of course, job security is still there, but you get really good pay, really good benefits, and you get a really good pension. So something has to give.
We're going to open it up for questions. If I can see a show of hands.
And students love student questions.
Yeah, I mentioned before, the room costs money, but the music is free. Yes, sir.
Matt, in regards to what I'm perceiving is it's an doesn't work. Yet, every year, in the housing area where I live, the homes have gone down in value. We know that those incomes out there in my area have been reduced dramatically. Yet, every time there is a levy on the ballot for schools, they pass. And my taxes have been raised now twice in the 7.5 years that I've lived where I live. How do you break that boundary where, you know, because they're holding a kid up and you're going to put the kids up there is how I feel that this is going on.
Yeah, so, you know, let's talk, we'll use in Dublin as the example since we all live here, most of us, and I know it pretty well. 2004, before I actually moved to Dublin, we were still in Washington, you guys passed the levy for the schools, 65-35, right? 20-point swing, or 30-point victory. 2008, in no opposition, levy passes 55-45. It's a 20-point loss, right? It's a swing. No opposition, right? No opposition. This year, I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens in November, because what you've got, and this is where it comes in, right, is, who has kids in the system? Who went to curriculum night? I was coaching my kid's soccer team. My wife became just irate because, you know, they played the Dave Axter video, pushing the levy, captive audience, not the place on curriculum night, but pushing it. So a lot of parents have called me complaining about that, and there's a media interest in some of those things. Then, you know, you show up at the school and there's a 10-foot sign in front of it that says, you know, here are all the things that'll happen if you do, and, you know, all that. And then, you know, I guess this was, I think, yesterday, you know, my daughter brought this home again, nice letter from Axter talking about the levy and how important it is, and doing us this great favor of giving us a voter registration form. I assume he assumes that's only those who are going to vote for it. Right, you got the PTAs that are pushing stuff out, and so you've got this in-bed distribution system, right? But you're not supposed to campaign taxpayer funds, and this stuff skirts that issue because it doesn't say vote. So it's real clever on how they do it. But there's never really much opposition to these things because, right, I hear it all the time. When I have written letters or I've stood up and the job I do, man, your poor kids, they must get abused in school. And I said, no, not at all. I have every belief that a teacher can separate what dad does from my kid, and they do. Great, my kids have had great, except for one teacher that got out of the classroom after that year. Great teacher, and they're very good teachers. She was terrible, right? And they knew it, so they took care of her, which was great. Although she now makes administration instead of finding a job, that's all right. But they did a great job, they do a good job, and they separate it. I don't worry about that, but most parents have a real concern that their kids are going to be blackballed or penalized because the parents are the ones standing up against. So nobody wants to fight these things. So what's remarkable, though, is 40-60% of levies fail every year. August, 85% failed. There was no opposition to these things by and large. Some folks here I know have tried to do some opposition, and when they've done minimal opposition in Worthington, they fail. It's just a little bit of education. You have to have folks willing to step up, put a little bit of money into the system, get a little bit of the word out there, and suddenly people go, ooh. And I think they're going to have a real hard time right now because the economy's terrible because they want more, and there's just that disconnect that I just don't think is going to keep selling.
Who's going to listen? Anyone?
So do you think SB 5 will solve the problem enough, or are we going to have to do additional reforms if it passes?
You're not. I mean, I won't put Representative Duffy on the spot, but you will get no more reforms. I mean, it was hard enough to get, I think, SB 5 through. I think Senator Gilmore was still a senator when that got through. So it was hard enough to do that. But this is it. And if it goes down, my guess will be getting any reforms on any major issues will be dead. So the idea of pension reform, if you want to get real pension reform done, if issue 2 goes down, well, if the no vote wins, you're going to see a legislature that is very timid going forward, running for political cover, worrying about 2012 and all those things. It's just the political reality. You know, if we push the right to work issue, and God love them, every time we talk to legislators, say, oh, but man, in 1958 we got killed on that issue, and I think, oh my God, yeah, the height of the labor movement, of course you got killed on that issue, but it's not 1958. However, issue 2, no one will talk about 1958. 1968 anymore. They'll talk about 2011. And unions will own this state in a way, at the legislature especially, that will be hard to get anything major done after that. So, I think that, you know, we've got an opportunity. If that opportunity is squandered, you know, Wisconsin obviously upheld theirs, and the early results coming out of Wisconsin is great stuff. They're saving money. They're not having to lay off teachers. So far so good for those folks willing to use the tools.
I called John Casey not too long ago, and I didn't get to speak to him, but I spoke to his secretary, who was very nice, by the way. And I suggested, and maybe you don't have the power to do something like this, but this is an absolute fact. What's happening right now in Ohio, I don't know whether this is true across the country or not, but in Ohio, the fees for each of the teachers and the fees for the union are taken out of their pay by the state, and that money is sent to the union.
I mean dues.
In dues.
Dues.
Right. That's sent to the union. Now this is a fact. 3 different cases. The membership of the union that was, this procedure was taken away from, dropped 90%. And another group dropped 85%. And another group dropped 70%. Why can't we take away from the union this freebie that we give them that the taxpayers are paying for? What, they should be able to collect their own dues.
And they will have to, if issue 2 is upheld. That's, you know, one of the provisions, right, is to make sure that you don't use government resources for that kind of stuff, including especially PAC contributions. I'm sorry?
Yeah, but if SB 5 doesn't go through.
Yeah, then there's.
Well, but that's why it's all the marbles, right? And we did this when I worked for the governor of Colorado. He could through executive order actually make that you can't use government resources to do this, and the same result, right? People won't write the check because they're like, I'd rather have the money in my own pocket. So that, no, that's very powerful. But again, you don't want people to get kind of obscure the point, which is, I know I don't like unions probably more than most folks, but this is not the driver. The driver truly is we have got a fiscal crisis, especially at the local level. If you cannot give those in charge the ability and power to restructure things, it won't get restructured, and that fiscal crisis will get worse. So you're going to have young firefighters, young police officers, young teachers either terminated because there's no money for them, or you're going to have your taxes go up, and where they can do it without a vote, they'll do it. Marion County, under emergency power, increased its income tax, just like that, voting commission. And so you'll see those kinds of things happening because they'll be able to do it. So you really are going to have to put this in the context of, it is all about what can we afford. It would be great if we could continue to pay what we pay, right? And it's true, asking a firefighter to go to a burning building, or a police officer to patrol a dangerous neighborhood, a teacher to, especially teachers that are in those really poorly performing schools where the kids aren't ready to learn, don't have the parental support that Dublin kids do, right? Those teachers are battling a lot. So it is, can you pay them enough? In a theoretical sense, never, right? But we don't live in a theoretical world, we live in a real world where we have finite resources. So we've got to make tough choices, and that means you got to restructure things so that we can keep everything aligned in the right context in terms of pay what we can afford to pay, not what we can, what we would like to pay. We all like to make more money. That's the case in any profession.
Say, Matt, is a $90,000 per year teacher twice as good as a $45,000 per year teacher?
No, but let me change that a bit, because I think, I love context. I think it's really important, right? We actually need to have this debate about substance. Should we pay an elementary school gym teacher $96,000? You may say, yeah, we should. I gotta say, supply demand, it's not the hardest one to be I'd really rather reserve those salaries for the physics teachers or the math teachers, especially in our middle and elementary and in high schools, right? I'd rather us be able to stop looking at teachers as this blank thing that says, oh, you're a teacher in your 9th year, you've got a master's degree, wow, there's what you get paid. I'd rather say, wow, you're a teacher teaching a really tough area, you're doing good, and that gym teacher caps out at a much lower rate, but if, we've got a great gym teacher at my kid's school. I mean, she is phenomenal. The stuff she does, I'm like, we go to these things, I'm like, oh my gosh, she turned the whole gym into an Olympics, venue. That's great. Let's reward her through bonuses where we can afford to, right? When we have the extra money. But to just have this lockstep system doesn't make sense. It just, again, it's treating teachers as this, bland, massive thing rather than individuals who have unique skills and talents that have differing, supply-demand requirements, because it's much harder to be a physics teacher than it is to be a gym teacher. And it's not just kind of gym teachers, and I know there's some coaches that are going to come after me on this, because they're all gym teachers, but, hey, it's just reality. I mean, it's just reality. My dad, by the way, was a phys ed gym teacher when he got out of college. And what's so interesting is, after, he's a Catholic too, so after 4 kids, and 2 more that then came, he realized he actually couldn't support them on teacher's pay back in the 1970s. So he got out of the profession, had my dad stayed in, and just gutted it out. He actually would have retired with a great pension. Right now, the guy nearly broke, he's always got Social Security and a little bit of 401k, not much there. So it's one of those interesting things that you see all the time.
I guess I'm wondering why breaking that tie between the fund channel that this gentleman was talking about would not be important. To me, that's a huge, money is power in many ways, and that's a huge funding channel that he was referring to. I personally would like to see that separate. So that's wondering.
Yeah, no, that's great, right? I'm not saying it's not important, but what I'm saying is it's not the reason we need to make sure these powers are preserved. That's not going to suddenly, let's say we wake up tomorrow and we've eliminated the unions, okay? But, no, wait a minute, that's not, but that doesn't mean you suddenly have the power, right, to just start making changes. That you're still going to have to deal with all these issues. And the issue is that, yeah, the unions make it more difficult, but they make it more difficult because there's a law that exists that gives very little power to management. It's just a fundamental reality. They have to bargain over everything, and virtually everything has become a mandatory topic for bargaining. And if you take away Peter, you got to give Paul. And that's why the structure of this is to say, let's remove all this stuff from bargaining and focus on wages and for fire and police safety issues, because that's really what matters. And let's focus on these issues and not have to essentially rob Peter to pay Paul on all these other issues, right? It gets rid of some of the extravagant stuff, like the Cincinnati guy who retired with a $430,000 check for his bank sick leave because he happened to not be sick, right? So those are the things we got to stop getting rid of, right? Double dipping isn't even addressed in this thing, and we got lots. We got probably 15 to 20 legislators that are double dippers right now. We've got a whole lot more. That's another problem we've got to get rid of, right? We've got these things, these retirement programs that nobody knows about for fire and police that are, folks retiring with walking out the door getting $1 million lump sum payments. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Okay, next up.
With the constant change in the economy and the downfall, and plus also the constant change in how the school districts are getting further into a deficit, what kind of changes would we have to make to get the nation economy back to at least a stable amount, and same thing with the school districts. Same thing with the school districts. And if we were to make those changes, about how long do you think it would take after those changes are in place?
First one's a hard question, but I'll answer it because I never shut up. The second one is easier, right? You got to realign the main driver of cost of the school district level, which is compensation packages. What that means is, how we got all 614 school districts, we took the data. What we also did is we said, let's just pretend that we could take a 10% compensation cut in every school district today. So that would be 6% as a pay cut, 3% as a shift of healthcare premiums, and then let's say 2% as a pension thing, right? But the total savings right now, 10% across the board. And then we'll limit growth in the future years to 2015 to 3.2%, which is the historical inflation rate in Ohio. If we did that, that $7.6 billion deficit turns into $1 billion surplus. And that's before the local government fund cuts that just happened in the budget. So that would have created some cushion, right? But nobody's doing that. Well, it's not true. 4 districts have done base pay cuts. The money's so bad today that they've actually done base pay cuts. We've got to say, look, it's far better to do an across the board 3, 4, 5% base pay cut, not just pay, but comp cut, right? Than to say, you 5 teachers, sorry, you're the last in, so you're the first out the door. That makes no sense. We'd rather keep those teachers, but truly, don't not build something. Don't squeeze here and say, oh, we've been so responsible with your money. Well, we've been paying the mortgage of our superintendent for 2 years up in Sugar Green Falls. That's crazy, but we've been paying that now. I don't know if you knew that, right? Couldn't sell his house up in Sugar Green Falls, so we've been paying for his mortgage. We don't do it anymore. I think he finally sold it, right? That's crazy. Why is that the case? Right? I came into Buckeye. I took a pay cut. We should have pay cuts coming from the top, big ones, and by the time we get down to the janitor, much smaller ones, right? But that's the way you deal with these issues. You don't just say, give us more money when your house is worth less, when your compensation has been frozen or reduced. On the national level, that's a much harder beast. Just so you know, we took, every month we have a little sheet, it's a 1-pager called Ohio by Numbers, and we take the latest BLS data, and we crunch it for all 50 states, and we show where Ohio fits in. And one of the things we do is we project based upon the historical 20-year growth job numbers, where we expect if we have best case scenario in Ohio over the next few years, when we will recover the jobs lost, which would give us back to about 4.8 million private sector jobs. We're about 4.35 today. We don't expect to get back there until November of 2016. So we've got to, and again, there's only so much state can do. That really is a national, global issue. So one of the things we've got to stop doing is stop extending the pain. Right? One of the things that really Paul Volcker did, President Reagan allowed him to do it, so he gets credit, is allow Volcker to really wrench all that inflation out of the system. And it was really painful. We had more job losses in that period of time, but things quickly then recovered, right? We got the pain out of the system. What we've done over the last several years, and it started under Bush, so this is not a let's beat up on Obama. This started with President Bush, is we've done all these stupid policies that have extended the pain in the housing market, in the job market, and we keep putting on more stuff out there that creates more uncertainty. That means nobody's going to spend their money because they're just worried where it's all headed. And so part of this issue is we've got to essentially allow us to hit bottom so that we can get it out of our system, almost like the fever. Let the fever hit that peak high and then kill the virus, and let's then start recovering. And we keep delaying that. And that happened again today with the Fed doing the twist on $400 billion of debt, where they're just going to further extend the pain and make it longer before we recover. It's really frustrating. And I should say, on the last page of that handout I gave you, there's a web link. So what we've done is everything that we have done on collective bargaining reform in the last 2 years, we put on that one page. So if you go to buckeyeinstitute.org/get the facts, it has all of our salary tools. We're just about to hit 5 million searches of our government salary tools. Hugely popular thing to figure out how much folks are making. So again, you might think they're making too little, so you want to improve the levy. Most people don't make that decision. From a job comparison tool, we took, oh my God, all of the state job codes, and there were like a ton of them. And we boiled those down to about 1,400. That will allow you to go in and compare. If you're a lawyer, you're a nurse, you're a janitor, you're a teacher, you can compare what you make to the lowest paid person last year in that job classification, the highest paid person last year, and then the median in that job classification. Again, our view is we'll let the data talk for itself, and you may come to conclusions on that on your own. We have all of our, remember I told you we did a chart for every single school district. Those are organized by counties. So you can go to your county, find your school district, and there you'll see the numbers. We have all of our charts and documents we've done on this, our analysis of Senate Bill 5, all of our myths, the top 10 myths, the next 5. We have video, we have audio interviews online, Bob Connors or all of the guys up in Toledo. So lots of stuff. So you can go to that webpage. If you have any questions, you can always call us. The number's on there as well. Feel free to call us and ask us if you don't understand something or you think we're wrong. which we are sometimes. We are. Let's see. You want me to talk about the myths?
Few of your favorites.
You're my favorites. How can I? No. Where's the first one? There it is. So, what we've done is we've issued the top 10 myths of collective bargaining reform, and then we did the next 5, because every time you hear one of these, and again, I'm on these shows all the time with folks, so I always hear them say, "Are you kidding me?" So we do them. So one myth is that without collective bargaining reform, the safety of our fire and police officers will be at risk. So what we did is we went and we got the injury and death rate for firefighters and police officers for every single state over the last 11 years. And we compared states where they have a right to collectively bargain against states where they do not. And there are lots of states where they don't. And guess what the finding was? 0 difference. Actually, it was safer to be a police officer in the states where there isn't a union than the states, but just slightly, like a fraction of a percent slightly. So the reality is 0 statistical difference between the two, right? Which makes sense, because I have every belief that your chief of police, your chief of fire is not going to put his men and women in harm's way and be irresponsible. No mayor, no chief, nobody wants to be the person who has to deal with four people dying because you didn't provide them with the right equipment, because you didn't staff them properly, because you sent them in a dangerous way without the right training. That's nuts, right? Nobody wants that kind of liability. So people, because we're human and we care for others, we take care of it. That's why, like it was interesting, in one of the debates we got with one of the IFF guys, which is the firefighters union, they said, "Oh, we're going to have all these safety issues." And I said, the media came and they said, "Is that really true?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Is he telling me that Mayor Coleman is not going to take care of him?" Which I knew, of course, he wouldn't, right? Because Mayor Coleman. So it's funny because then he had action. Well, they went back to him and said, "So do you believe Mayor Coleman's not going to take care of you?" "Whoa, that's not what I'm saying. I think Mayor Coleman will, but it's that next mayor that may not." And it's like, oh, of course, the illusionary mayor that wants to be on the front page for a bunch of firefighters or cops dying on his watch. Not reality, right, folks? So that was one of the myths that we talked about, because we thought that was important to because, right, they use the imagery of the firefighters and police officers because it's really powerful emotional stuff. So we felt we wanted to make sure we tackled that, say, well, no one wants any of these folks to suffer like that. Let's see, what else? Yeah, let's see this other one that, we saw this, right? We read it, because I don't need to, this is right from the Axner's letter. Let's see here. We have a levy. The state of Ohio has reduced our funding by $10.9 million over the next 2 years. Our district must take care of itself, in spite of the funding cuts. Blaming the governor in the budget, right? Again, that's why I want to say, no, let's look at the budget as of October, before there even was a Governor Kasich, to show that the money was hemorrhaging at that point. The local government fund cuts are going to make it worse, but marginally worse, right? I mean, 10.9 million is what, 5.45 million over the course of 2 years. That's like a drop in the bucket compared to the $56 million hole we're facing. So that's not going to make it any easier. But blaming the governor is not the right way to go. Another one I think is really important is collective bargaining is a right. We've lost this PR battle. It's not a right. There's no constitutional right to collectively bargain. Right? Where that right exists was in a place called the USSR. Right? It doesn't exist anymore. We as taxpayers have entitled them to collectively bargain in a law passed, statutory law in 1983, by purely partisan manner. And we have every right to claw back some of those entitlements because we can't afford to sustain them anymore. So we do ourselves a service by referring to these things as rights. I think I actually did it 10 minutes ago when I talked about it. It's not a right, it's an entitlement that we allow them to have. FDR didn't believe that they should have that entitlement because he saw this massive problem between, right, there's no profit loss driver in government, unlike in private sector unions, where at least the folks on the management side are trying to protect something. Give us a break. The folks on the management side in government aren't trying to protect much, especially when there's people coming in.
Well, focus on the big three, the firefighters, police, and teachers, which of course is a great whole, which money is being thrown away. But what is the percentage of other state workers and municipal workers and all of that whose contracts and benefits are out of line with the private sector that we could actually clean up some of this by dealing with those also? I mean, I'm just wondering what, what the percentage is.
Yes, so I can't give you district by district. Here's what I can tell you. In 87 out of 80 counties, federal workers in those counties make substantially more than their private sector neighbors. In 85 out of 80 counties, state government workers in those counties substantially out-earn their private sector neighbor. And in 69 out of 80 counties, local government workers make more than their private sector neighbors. That's compensation. You add in all the benefits, there's really no comparison. So pretty much where you won't find that, although you'll find it in the comparison to private sector people there, rural counties, not very many jobs. That's where you'll see, potential comparisons that are close. But even in those counties, the best jobs to have are the ones in government because they're the most stable, secure source of funding is there. So no matter how you slice it, the problem kind of pervades all three levels of government.
So as far as straightening up the budget shortfalls, I mean, how much could we gain by working on these other people as well?
Oh yeah, I think it's the number is 1.4 billion if we tackle the state, local, higher ed, and K-12. And we're looking at about $1.4 billion a year in savings, which would compound going forward, because right, you say that you create a new base. So it's a big chunk of money. That means for us not higher taxes. But the other problem we have here, Ohio has really high local taxes compared to the other states. We have the 7th highest tax burden, and what happens is, or 6th highest. What happens is when that gets combined with our state, which isn't that high, we end up being one of the top, I think we're 18, we're ranked 18 right now, 18th highest state. And so our problem really is a local government problem because we have 3,900 different jurisdictions, all have taxing authority, which means that is the 7th highest in the country. So we have a huge number of jurisdictions that each add a little tax. You know that the average property in Ohio has 25 levies on it. Some date back to Eisenhower. I kid you not, right? But to give all these pieces on there that all add up to high taxes. And so it's not just the prevention of taxes going higher, it's also at some point, if we want to be a place that is attractive for businesses to stay, grow, and come, we've got to frankly reduce our tax rate for burden, or no matter how many jobs Ohio or third frontiers are out there, we're just waiting for somebody to actually throw more money at them, and then we lose the money race. We got to structurally fix our economy so that way, right? We no matter what bidding war is, we're a place that they want to be because low taxes, low regulation, pro-employer, prosperity, all that great stuff.
Jim, I think we got time for.
I haven't read the proposal, I apologize. But who will end up with the power to make these changes? Is this a legislative thing or is the governor's office?
No.
Exactly how's that going to happen? And also, obviously, this is going to require a considerable amount of marketing on this side because the other side is going to try to kill it for everything that they've got. So how is that going to happen?
Well, that's actually what they're killing it right now. I mean, that's the vote on November 8th is to kill the reforms. What the reforms would do is the current system, you go to the negotiation table, you get to final best offer, don't agree, you go to a conciliator, you go to fact finding, all that fun stuff. Then you get to the arbitrator. Arbitrator comes in, tends to split the baby, issues his or her decision and says, oh, here's what I've arrived at, and then you're kind of bound by that, binding arbitration. That's it, that's all she wrote. The new system essentially allows management, those who represent taxpayers, to essentially, if they continue to refuse to accept that last best offer, to implement it. And then there's also a provision that would allow, if they agree to something and taxpayers who don't like it, there's a mechanism that taxpayers can use to essentially nix that. It won't be used very often because it's just, I think, sense would be most of them will do what they need to do. But again, it's up in the air on how many folks are actually going to use this tool to do what they need to do. And the issue really is going to come down to the wages, because even if you shift the healthcare premium to the 15% floor, you eliminate pension pickups, and those are really, like Dublin City Schools, teachers don't get the pension pickup, it's the administrators. That too. 63 administrative workers are the ones that get the pension pickup. It's not the teachers and the janitors. So you eliminate those things, That's good, but that's nibbling on a $10,000 health insurance policy. That's nibbling on $2,000 this or that, not the average $70,000 pay, or that's still negotiable. So that's where the really focus is going to have to be, try to see what happens there.
Who has the power?
The power will still remain in the process of negotiation between the two parties, but ultimately management will have the ability to implement a last best offer if it's rejected and doesn't go. They got rid of arbitration because it was viewed as a system that it's the you and I know ultimately there is this arbitration process, and I say 0%, you're going to come in at 5% because you think the odds are they're going to split the baby and do 2.5%. That's essentially how the system is being gamed. This gets rid of the gamesmanship essentially.
Okay, before our last question, first, once again, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to come out tonight. But I have to ask you, just as a show of hands, if I could get a little survey on how you heard about our meeting, so we can make sure we're effective in communicating with you in the future. Could you show of hands for those who heard about it through their own email account? Show of hands of those who heard about it from a friend. Anybody hear about it on the radio? Any other way I should know about it? There we go. There we go. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook. Excellent. Very good. All right, we'll have our last question. Matt, thank you very much. I'm going to let you wrap it up.
I wanted a question too.
Well, I tell you what, we're all going to be here. I mean, anybody who'd like to stick around afterwards, Matt, you'll have a few moments with us.
No, I'm out of here.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I feel bad that this is the last question, but,
I don't feel bad.
okay. I am here just to be informed. I'm trying to make a decision on this. I am a 22-year-old kindergarten teacher at my first job. I'm really excited about it. No, in Buckeye Valley. And so I'm just kind of, I live in Dublin. But something you said that kind of struck a chord with me. I'm not sure if this is just the general opinion of the Republican Party or if it's something that it's just your personal opinion about, you know, a gym teacher getting paid less than a physics teacher. Strikes a chord with me because I consider myself a fairly intelligent person. I could have been anything in the high school realm of teaching. I could have been. I coached field hockey. I could have done all of that in high school. But I think that my gifts and my talents lie with kindergartners. And I'm not really sure how you would test me, a kindergarten teacher, as easily you could test a physics teacher, shove them a test in their face, and they do that. But how do you test me and my gifts and abilities with kindergartners?
That is the second best question I've had in all. And I mean that, and here's why. Because one of the problems with kind of the pro-reform folks is we too quickly throw the merit pay thing out there and haven't really thought through what that means. And kindergarten is where that's a really hard thing to do because you really can't do, you know, the NAEP test, or you can't do the physics things. It's one of those hard ones to measure. So that's a great question. How you're going to have to handle that, I think, is there are probably going to be kindergarten, first, second grade, not second, maybe kindergarten, first grade, where you're going to probably have to come up with an alternative system where we define merit in a different way than a value add on a test, because you really don't have the standardized test that you start in that second grade and then really third grade ramp up every year. So I hope that's what the group who are working on the merit-based system, and I would say any merit-based system that is a state-mandated broad brushstroke should be rejected by any conservative as a mandate, no differently than we don't like one coming from Washington. They should outline the contours of what merit should look like in terms of the framework, but really allow local school districts to determine the factors and the how. Because that, to me, is really where we have very big differences between school districts. And if you have a broad brushstroke, you're going to fail to recognize that Dublin is very different than Columbus, which is very different than Buckeye Valley, which is very different than a very poor rural school district. So we've got to have flexibility within that system. But kindergarten teachers, you can't measure merit in the same way you do a fifth grader or a physics teacher. So we're going to have a unique, I think, for the first couple of grades, because we don't have the mechanisms hit that objectivity measure. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's the big question mark. But it's an important one to keep in mind because we too quickly say, oh, merit, what does that mean for kindergarten? That's a tough one.
All right, folks, once again, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Stick around. I know Mal